first of all, thank you all so much for being here. I know for some of us it is wildly early. Where I am, the sun hasn't even risen, which really not a fan of that. So thank you for participating. Thank you for taking part in this conversation. It's going to be interesting. Emotions might come up. That's okay. It's going to be intense. It's cool. A lot of this is just really kind of open. I'm just going to ask a few questions and just consider it like we're just chatting, even though we're on a computer screen, and that kind of sucks. I know, so Mother, Kim.
Yes.
And Tracy and Darren, I think you guys were going to chat a little bit. And Darren, since you have to go, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to share. I mean, my journey is interesting because I think it wasn't until very, very recently I realised, actually through a grief counsellor, I've been grieving my whole life. I lost my brother at the age of, I think I was 7, and I was 4, he was 7. But I didn't realise until very, very recently, because of the work we're doing now. And I think it's a fascinating, important sector to be involved in right now. And as I said earlier, I think COVID has helped to normalise the conversation, I think, because everybody now is implicitly aware of their own mortality. And I think dying well is essential in modern society. And we have the power and capability to do all sorts of wonderful things. I hope that sort of starts the conversation, but I'm really, really interested to hear from Kim.
Absolutely. If you want to jump in, we can just jump right into you. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you just kind of share a little bit about your experience. Obviously, we lived through it together, but just for everybody else in the room, a little bit of what happened, the circumstances. Share as much or as little as you want.
Okay. Well, my father, he died in August of 2015 after being in the hospital for a very short stay of about 3 days. My family and I were not prepared because the doctors didn't tell us really the truth about what was going on. They gave us hope. There was none. So choices were made that were not good. So there are a lot of regrets there. My mother, she passed away in July of 2017. We knew that she was dying, so we were able to be prepared for her death properly. We had hospice. They helped immensely. So yeah, I have experienced, and so has Niki, experienced the difference between a death that we were totally clueless and a death that we were as prepared as you possibly could be prepared. So yeah, that's my experience, and I feel like everybody should be talking about it so that the people left behind know what to do.
Yeah, 100%. When all this was happening, like can you share any kind of questions that came up that you didn't know the answers for, that just like logistics, emotions, any kind of thing?
Well, when my father was dying, I would have liked to known what the progress would have been, what signs to have looked for. I wanted to know, I guess, an approximation of when he was going to die so that I could make my plans. I could be there. My mother wasn't there when he died. They were married for 60 years, and I think she should have been. He, at the very end, when the hospital called and he said he wanted me and not my mother to come, I think it was because he didn't want me to waste my time driving an extra half hour to get her, because I don't think he thought he was going to live long enough to see her. And he didn't want to die alone. That's what I think. I don't know, because he was unconscious when I got there. But had I known that he was going to die that day, I would have brought my mother. She wouldn't have left. I wouldn't have left. And obviously Niki wouldn't have left the hospital. We would have all been there. My mother, I think, was angry with me until the day she died. She didn't talk to me after that, even though I brought her up here. And I think part of her anger was she thought that I kept her away from my father when he died. So, yeah, there were a lot of questions.
Well, that's a big one that I'm hearing about, just basic education around death and dying and the physical process of what happens when a person is getting ready to pass. And no one really discusses that. And like, least of all, you'd think a hospital would tell you because it's a hospital.
Yeah.
So that like opens up a whole new conversation in regards to the medical field and their training. I'm not saying doctors stink because they don't. Let's see. Sorry, I just got a message from Himali. I'm not really sure why.
I think it's a fascinating area because I think what happens is clinicians, practitioners and nurses in a clinical setting are trained to save life. And that's ultimately what they're trying to do constantly, even if they're aware that somebody is dying. And I think that is a problem. I think it's a problem that needs to be addressed in modern society. And there needs to be a clear definition of holistic kind of end of life approaches and that gentle hand-holding experience for people at the end of life. And there needs to be a transitional process in between. Those are my thoughts, but I'm interested.
Yeah, 100%. I get stumped by this question a lot because I've tried to just clear cut it because I like to do that. I said, oh man, the medical industry just really sucks. They need to be honest with people and patients and stuff like that. But then I've encountered just as many stories from people who actually work in the medical field who say things like, oh, well, we tried to tell the family and they literally were in straight up denial. Or they didn't want to hear it. And it's like, well, then what do they do? What's their job? So it's like some weird thing that has to happen both in society and both on the medical front. And it really hasn't happened either way. I think I'm observing it closer in society a little bit, especially in spaces like this. But yeah, that's definitely part of the larger problem.
But I think the conversation has to start with us, because it has to start with all of us making our choices clear from as soon as we can, from now, whatever our age, and an acceptance that however it will come, it's going to come to us all. And until we actually have a better acceptance of that, and that actually making those choices is a really important part of being in control when death comes. I think, and I think we are moving, actually. I think there is a movement. And I think in COVID, there's been a real desire for people to talk more about this, partly because they don't want to die in some of the terrible ways that we've seen people die, but also because it's brought death really up to the fore for us.
Yeah, people are implicitly aware of their own mortality now, aren't they? It's been painted to us in a multitude of colours by the media. And I think that has helped normalise the conversation to an extent. But you're absolutely right, Anna. We all need to continue and drive what is effectively now a social movement.
Yeah. Somewhat interesting point of view and spin on that, Darren, regarding the media. It's like, while I do agree that they have pushed forward and kind of normalized the topic of death, I also wonder if at the same time they're kind of continuing the cycle of pushing it away, because they're like, let's get back to normal. Let's do safety, as if you could avoid death. I mean, my partner almost died in a car crash going to visit me a couple of years ago. And it was just a car crash. He was on the road. It was the most normal thing he could possibly be doing. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but a truck ran him off the road. And that should have killed him. So it's like, that could be me tomorrow. I could be going to the grocery store and I could be one of the people who is like wrapped around the telephone pole outside my house. So it's like, I'm not saying COVID's great, but I sometimes put forth the idea that while at the same time they're normalizing death, and I really appreciate that, I fear that they're also saying like, we can avoid it as long as we're safe. And it's like, no.
None of us
No.
are leaving here alive, are we?
No, absolutely not. Death
It's
and taxes and all
inevitable.
that stuff.
It's kind of, yeah.
We're all one heartbeat away.
Absolutely. Yeah. One breath, 1 second.
Yep.
I agree completely, Kim. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to back up 2 seconds, and I want to hear from Tracy. You've been just kind of been about there in the background, and I want to put you under the
I'm
microscope
content
too.
just to sit and listen. But
Yeah, you don't want to talk. It's up to you.
No, go ahead. What do you want?
Well, I want to know why you're here. I want to know what brought you here. Like, what circumstance happened and
Okay. Well, my mother passed away 3 years this month from complications of Alzheimer's, and we were very blessed. Compared to like what Kimmy went through and Niki with her mom and her parents, we kept mom at home, and my dad did. That was, now my mom was 93 when she passed, and my dad basically took on the role of taking care of her, and I have to give him a lot of credit for that. Other than that, hospice is just phenomenal. Hospice is an awesome organization. I had now, and again, not all nurses are created equal, but we had one nurse, Ralph, who Niki, like you were saying, he was very straightforward. I mean, he told us everything to expect. Eventually, I mean, there for a long while, she could walk to the table and eat her own breakfast and all of that. And then as she continued to decline, she's in a wheelchair. And then the next thing you know, she can't feed herself and all that. So I was not in denial. I knew that every day she was getting closer and closer to death. And my only thing was I wanted to be there, and thank God I was. And she had a very peaceful passing. For my father, I think it was much, much harder on him, because she would have a good day and he would go, "She's getting better. She's getting better." And he said this for years, and I'm like, "Come on, Dad, you're a smart man. Every day that she lives, she's a day closer to dying. She is not getting better." But he wanted to make her exercise. He wanted her to live so badly. They had been married 72 years. And he would want to make her do her exercises. And it just got to the point that she didn't want to do any of those things. He would try to force feed her. That would upset me. I'm like, "Dad, don't. She doesn't want it." But anyway, I mean, in the scheme of things, with him taking care of her, with me going up and visiting her a couple of times a month and helping him out a little bit, it was not a real bad experience. I mean, it's terrible to lose a parent. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's terrible. But I will tell you this. My mom had always said that she never wanted to be an invalid in a bed and having somebody. My mom did not want to live that way. So for me, it was a blessing. And I know she had been saved. She had been ministered to. And in my mind, her suffering, all of that stuff was over, and she's in a better place.
Gotcha. So for you, it was not even so much difficulty on your end, but kind of dealing with your dad was the harder part.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think he denied it right up until the end. I mean, it's like, "Dad, she's not getting better." It's like the nurse said, she's going to lose the ability to swallow. She's going to, lose the ability to lift her head. And he was spot on. I mean, he told me, never told my dad because my dad didn't ask. So I think it's important to ask these questions, right? If you have a caregiver or a nurse or a doctor that tap dances around the issue, people need to know.
Right.
Yeah.
They need.
He loved and cared for her for so many years, Tracy, and it kind of sounds as that it's very, very difficult for him to let go, really. And in some respects, I think that's the role that doulas and soul midwives and companions and end of life facilitators and practitioners can assist and help with, especially that family bond and those ties. It's an interesting one because, and again, but yesterday was the anniversary of my mother-in-law's death, 3 years now, and she died from a very, very aggressive form of Lewy body dementia. So I understand the journey that your mum went through as well. My mother-in-law's was very, very aggressive, and within 6 months, it was kind of she died. I mean,
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, my wife and my sister-in-law were kind of primary carers, sharing that responsibility between them. But I noticed that decline daily, and I was again aware of it, I guess. But that's so I kind of understand that aspect that you're talking about. It's a difficult one certainly for close family members, I think.
Yes. Oh, she was his life, and of course we started seeing signs of dementia / Alzheimer's back in like 10 years prior. 10 years prior. I mean, I would be talking to her on the phone and she would ask me the same questions, a dozen times and could not remember. But yeah, it was hard on my dad. It was really, really hard on him. He lost a lot of weight. I mean, y'all can say, how bad he looked at the funeral. I mean, it took its toll on him. And since her death, he's done remarkably well. But I give him credit, man, because he was there and watching us all like a hawk, make sure we all did our job and did it right. And didn't he, Kimmy?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. But you have to give him a lot of credit because that was not easy for a man that old and all the work that needed to be done. I mean, my mother had Parkinson's. She had leukemia. She was deaf. She had macular degeneration to the point where she couldn't see. She became violent because of her Parkinson's and the meds they had her on. So my dad had to put her into a nursing home. So, just seeing that with my mom and then having Phil having to take care of Tracy's mom, Virginia, my hat goes off to him. That was not easy.
No,
90, what was he, 95 years old, 94 years old, going through all that?
Wow.
Doing the worst part? Amazing. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Let me ask both of you this. Now we're kind of shifting from like the actual dying part into the more the caregiving side of it. How well did either of you feel like prepared to handle all of those issues? Like when your mom was violent, and you had to put her into a nursing home, do you think there were resources available to kind of support you in that process? Did you feel like you could talk to anybody about it? Did you feel heard? Tracy, the same for you. Did you feel like you guys had an appropriate space to like wrestle with all of these logistics, or was it just like, we're gonna do it, that's it, like have fun?
Yeah, no. We had an awesome support group through hospice between the nurses, the CNAs, the chaplains. Everybody communicated with us and told, what the next step and what we needed to go ahead and get prepared, as far as getting her, her casket and making all those arrangements. They kept us pretty much in the loop every step of the way. And I do think that she survived longer than they had anticipated. But that was because of the awesome care she was getting at home. I mean, she got awesome care at home.
It's good to hear the hospice is doing good stuff. Sometimes
I know.
On the other side of it, I hear bad stuff about hospice.
They're my heroes, man. I love hospice. Love hospice to death. They're an awesome organization. And had it not been for them, we would have been nuts. Who do we call? What do we ask for? What are we entitled to? It was quite a learning experience. And thank God, because hospice, like I said, they held our hand and walked us through every step of the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For me, no, we did not have a support. It seemed like the medical field basically wanted to put her in a mental home. They drugged her up. When they finally got her to where she was not violent, then they put her back into the nursing home. Which they wanted to basically keep her drugged up too. And my father and I, neither one of us wanted that, because that's not what my mom wanted either. You know, I mean, she wanted to be lucid as she could possibly be. So we did fight for that. And we did get it to the point where she was lucid. We tried to do organic types of things to help her with her Parkinson's by doing mental exercises, physical exercises. By the time my father died, she was actually getting better, and the doctors were amazed at how they had to back off some of her meds and how well she was doing. But then after my father died, as much as we tried, she didn't see any reason to keep going. So she basically stopped eating, stopped doing, cooperating. She just went downhill, and little less than 2 years later, she died. But that was her choice. That was her choice, and I had to let her do what she wanted to do. Even though it was against what I wanted. But no, we did not have support as far as the mental issues were concerned.
It's very interesting how we have two very different stories. I actually, Tracy, I was under the impression that you were feeling kind of lacking and kind of overwhelmed, but it's great to hear that.
I'm not saying it's not overwhelming.
Yeah.
It is, and to see a mother decline, because Kimmy knows. I was close to my mama. I loved my mama so much. She was just an awesome, fun-loving lady. And to watch her decline and then eventually forget who you are. I know, and I finally realized this, because I know that I'd be sitting with her at home and she would see Dad walking around. She'd go, "Who is that man? Who is that guy?" Whenever I would come after being gone a week or maybe 2 weeks, I know Dad kept telling her, "Tracy's coming, Tracy's coming, Tracy's coming." So she heard it and heard it and heard it. So whenever I'd show up and go give her a hug, I'd go, "Hi, Mama, and do you know who I am?" She'd go, "Of course I do. You're Tracy." But as time went on, I mean, it was just that they had implanted that, in her brain. But to see your mom slowly slip away is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and to have to change their diapers and treat their bed sores and all of that. But I will tell you some of my regrets, and of course it's too late now. There's a lot of things that I don't know about my mom. About her childhood. I mean, my God, I don't even know what my mom's favorite color was. I mean, I know she loved flowers, but I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't know about my mom, and that's kind of sad. So if I could go back 20 years, I'd be telling people, stay close with your folks, learn about them, find out about their childhood, find out what their favorite color is, her favorite season was the fall. So I know that because she loved the changing of the leaves and all of that. She loved that. She loved music. She loved dancing. But yeah, so those are my regrets. And then, like I said, it's exhausting seeing your parent like that. It's more emotionally exhausting,
If I could, I've literally got to go very, very short. Hi, Marley. Good to see you here. One of the things, Tracy, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things we learned following my mother-in-law's death, which, as I said, her anniversary was yesterday, 3 years ago. We were going through the family photo album, and I've mentioned this before, but we were going through the family photo album, and my 11-year-old son said, who's this? Who's that? And we've lost that family history. There's no one to turn to get those answers.
Yeah.
And that is what led us to creating Aftercloud. So people can do that now. People can start to create their life legacy, their enhanced life enrichment, and they can create a timeline, and they can do all these things. And I'm so glad you said that, because it's so vitally important that we understand, our parents, our grandparents, our family history, and everything that goes with it during that. Whilst we're living, we don't have to wait until we're dying.
You're exactly right. And I think people need to be prepared that we are not going to live forever. I mean, and then like Niki said, so it could be when your number's up, it's up. It could be an accident. So it's not too early to start finding out, about your family, your legacy, and the history and all that. You'd be doing that every single day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Right.
We're doing a bit of work at the moment, and I think it's really, really important as well for children, because they don't get bereavement support, and they learn very, very little about bereavement, even though they're going through that process of grief because their grandparents or their great-grandparents are dying. We're doing a lot now with intergenerational learning, specifically in Australia, but I know this is going on in other parts of the world. So I think that's important as well, where we get together with our younger children and we start to teach them, because the earlier they learn about this process, the more they'll understand about living life. I'm really, really passionate about this.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you personally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, focus work, super important, and Darren's in the front line of that. So
I'm just grateful, Niki, that you've brought people together that kind of can lead this conversation and as we said earlier, normalize it to an extent. I think it's really, really important. And I do have to go, because I'm so sorry, but I'd love to stay here. If you're still here when I come back, I will join again. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you, Darren.
Bye, Darren. Nice meeting you.
I look forward to having another conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye for now.
Himali, I think this is a good time to pause and say hello, good morning. I know it's like 6:05 a.m. where you are, so thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh. God bless you. I thought at 7:30 was bad.
I'm so sorry. I am actually in a bed and breakfast, and I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico, celebrating Day of the Dead.
Yeah, there you go.
And so yeah, it was the time change, so it was 5:30. I tried getting on. Anyway, sorry about that, and thank you for having me here.
No, 100%. Thank you so much for jumping on. It's so early and during your celebration, but what better way to celebrate it than talking about it? Totally. So Molly, I don't know, I can't remember if we discussed any of this during our first phone call. So, you can bring me up to speed like you're going to bring everybody else. Let me ask you, what kind of brought you to this space of, discussing death and dying? Was there any kind of loss that you experienced, or any kind of story? You can share as much or as little as you want. We're all cool here.
Well, my dad passed away 11 years ago, and since then I had this existential crisis, you may say, that, why are we here? What is our purpose? And I'm sure, 9 to 5 or getting married, having kids is not our purpose. And seeing my dad's legacy really put me on a path of, what is my legacy? What do I bring to the world? What is my purpose? And what am I supposed to be bringing into the world or my community? So that's the path. And I'm a physical therapist. I've always been in healthcare. But my job stops before hospice starts, or as soon as hospice starts. So I always had that curiosity. I also do energy work. And so I have helped patients and clients with transitioning, or at least feeling at peace and ease towards the end of life. And so my main focus or purpose or passion is to help families, caregivers, healthcare workers, to have that compassion, kindness, and really honor a patient or client that is transitioning, to honor their wishes, to honor whatever they are looking for, and not to be stuck. Because I've seen, I've seen patients that have a DNR, meaning do not resuscitate, and they have been in hospitals or nursing homes for years. They have contractures, they can't move, but yet the kids that are living far away, they keep reverting because they have power of attorney. They keep changing that DNR to, so the doctors and nurses have to follow whatever the kids say, and so bring them back. So my passion is to talking to these caregivers, like, what is the purpose? Why are they doing what they're doing? I know they feel guilty. They want to, they want to be close to their mom, or they want them around as long as they can.
Yeah.
But is it a quality of life? So those are some of the reasons. This is, my passion, and I did end-of-life doula, and moving forward, I work on legacy work, helping people capture those moments. So now that Tracy brought up, opened up can of worms, I was like, oh my God, I really don't know my dad's favorite color. And my dad was 2 when both his parents passed away. So I don't know much about his family and my dad's side of ancestral line and what they did. So I don't know anything about that. So that is one of the things that I wish that I knew. I would have asked him, and I would have, written it somewhere or recorded him speaking.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm hearing a lot of the same thing in terms of regrets, and I whenever I hear about bad things, my mind always wants to say, well, how can we resolve that, or where is it coming from? You can't resolve it, so you know where it's coming from. And so that kind of makes you think, we just kind of take people for granted. We don't think about or want to think about when they're not going to be here, and so we aren't sitting there obviously Hamal, your dad, is exempt because he was 2 years old, but like, we in this room don't always take the opportunity to treat interactions with other people or loved ones as if they were what they are, which is precious and profound and beautiful. And I'm going to get choked up just talking about that, because that's just a super important thing. That's something that I think is very beautiful that comes out of talking about death and dying. It's not just, like logistics and DNRs that don't work half the time. It's a cherishing of the time we have and the people that we have. And I think that's definitely something that just kind of came up for me when you were speaking about, when everybody was talking about regrets and not knowing, and having all these unanswered questions and all that kind of stuff. I guess
I was always lucky with both my parents. They would talk about their history, their childhood, everything. And anytime I asked questions, they were very open and upfront. And as Niki knows, she actually did the editing and putting together a book. My father wanted to leave a legacy as to what our family history was for that side of the family. And he did have Niki publish a book. My mother never finished hers. I need to go back and go into the lineage that she has written down, and we need to put together a book. But it has opened up dialogue with my family, and I've even spoken to Tracy about this, both sides of my family, to bring it forward for the next generations, for our nieces and our nephews, and cousins and little cousins, because there's a history there too that's being lived out right now.
Yep.
So it needs to be in the forefront so that people do know and families do know where they came from, and why they're here.
Absolutely. Very, very important insight. So there's an idea for him. We could do genealogy. Very important. I'll pose this
Genealogy with stories, with some family stories
Yeah.
peppered in.
Yeah. That's what I was saying. Good stuff. But let me pose this question to kind of like everyone here. So we've kind of gone through the past. We've kind of gone through our regrets. We've gone through our stories and our experiences that all kind of brought us here to this space. And so now looking forward, because dwelling in the past is kind of useless. How can we take this forward in everyday conversations? How can we make, I know what okay, so let me be straight with everybody. So when I first kind of got into this death space, death and dying and this kind of work, I remember looking into it and saying, wow, these people are kind of odd. They just seem very like in their own little bubble. And I think that's just kind of the nature of any group. It kind of has, any group, like any religion, any organization, any club has this kind of air of almost exclusivity. And how are we supposed to, and right now inclusion is a big subject of conversation. So how do we make death work more inclusive? How do we make it more accessible and not just some weird, like, oh, it's those weirdos, those morbid people. Like, I've been called that. Like, people think I'm kind of strange and morbid for talking about this sort of stuff, for being really passionate about this kind of stuff. And they're like, you're not going to die anytime soon. To which I say, well, you don't know that, and I don't know that. So first of all, like, we completely are at an impasse now. But like, what can we do to kind of push forth the notion that we're just dudes, we're just people wanting to have these conversations, because we've all seen the results and the destruction and the pain and the regrets that happen when we don't openly converse about this. I'm not saying that death is neat and tidy and a little box and one chat will fix it, because it won't. But I definitely think, and I think you guys all can agree, that if we had all had certain awarenesses and certain resources and certain discussions, that certain things wouldn't have turned out maybe the way they did. So yeah, let me kind of turn it over to anybody who wants to start. Like, what do you think we could do to normalize it?
I think it's interesting that we've got a number of doulas already in the room here. And I'm interested that we've also got a number of artists in our listening. We've got 12 people listening outside the room. And I think, for me, I am a person who spent my life working with creativity at the end of life, and then have become a doula, and I'm now training people to be doulas. And I think that role, there's a great place for art in this space is one answer to it. But I think also the growing movement of doulas who come with simplicity, I think, as a principle, and very much in response to the person who's dying and the family whom you've all mentioned. So, I think what you're doing, Himali, is fantastic because actually very often it is the family members who need the support as much, if not more, than the other people, and the invitation to have the conversation, and not as a scary conversation, but the invitation to as you say, to normalize it. So it's really great to hear. I'd like to hear more from you, Himali, about the kinds of things that you do in your transitionary space. I came into this work because I was a dear friend of mine who had cancer asked me on a walk one day whether, if it came to it and the cancer came back, I would look after her and her 2 young children whilst she was dying. And she said, and I want to die at home. And then she said, and I don't want to talk about this anymore because you'll know what to do. That was a massive kind of thing to be asked. But indeed, 6 months later, it became clear that she wasn't going to live. And I moved into the house, and with the 2 children and her partner, we made a space where it was possible for what is a terrible, sad situation, but it became a possible situation for 2 young children and a family to be with a mother who at the end it was dying. But there was openness, there was honesty, and there was normality in that space. In a way, what we were doing was keeping life going and, in a sense, normalizing a space for death and dying. And that, that situation is what then led me to think, this should be more possible. If we could be more open about this, how can we make this more possible? And that's what led me to be doing what I'm doing. But so it's great that we're even talking about doulas, and I'm hoping everybody in the chat and the people who are listening understand that, know about doulas. Oh, we've got some questions coming in. And also, Niki, if it's okay, I'd invite questions from people in the chat, because I know that there are people out there. So Sophie's got a question.
Great, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more, that's to me, about your friend's request not to talk about it after she put forward her request? The pause in the conversation sounds challenging. It's a really good question, Sophie. Now we're 10 years on from this, and I actually think that, and I understand much more now because I've been with many more people who are dying, and I think that was an intentional, any mother with young children doesn't want to talk about the fact that they may leave their children, let alone their family. So I think there was an intention, or not to really broach the subject, but that I felt she was she put a lot of other things in place quietly with other friends in those last months, and she didn't want to talk about any of it with any of us together. And I think that was an intention. So I think there was both a protectionism of herself and her family, but I think also there was an absolute understanding that around her, as she was dying, she needed certain things. And she intuitively understood that. I don't know whether that's answered your question.
If I may say, that's a big responsibility, and how wonderful that you were able to support your friend through those last phases and years. But for me, I love that question, and I just led a book with 24 other authors to write a chapter. And the name of the book was Sacred Death and 25 Tools for Caregivers. So my message, and that really my purpose, was to talk a little bit louder about death and be open to talk about death. I grew up in India, and it is kind of part of knowing that death is okay. We have home funerals. So the kids see everything. I've been around. I'm here in Oaxaca, Mexico right now for Day of the Dead. They invite kids to honor their ancestors. They invite kids to do these ceremonies, be there, around there. So it's like open conversation and just celebrate it more and mourn. And it's okay to mourn too. But so for the book, that was the thing for caregivers to talk openly, to honor the clients, to honor yourself, to step back, take care of yourself. Love yourself through when you're taking care of someone, because it's a great responsibility. And it can be overwhelming, frustrating, and all that things. If you don't take care of yourself, you don't take care of those emotions, it comes out on the patient, client, your family, loved ones who is transitioning. So, it gives different ways, different outlooks from different countries. I have an author from Australia, from New Zealand, from Austria, from India, from Mexico, Hawaii, and someone who's writing about their way of doing things. So there are different ways of doing things. There's nothing wrong or right. We talk about grief and how there's no beginning or end to grief. It's a continuous process. We're going to love our loved ones until we die, until we meet them in the other realm. And so I feel that, that was one of my goals, to talk loudly about, and I guess I was able to, and honored to have these 24 other voices talk about how they dealt with their loved ones passing, and what are some of the tools that you can use at home if need be to care for that. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
You know what actually surfaced when you were mentioning, you said that you grew up in India where death was okay and it was normalized, and even now in Mexico they're celebrating the Day of the Dead. And that made me think of kind of the lack and kind of where we are, which is like in the States. And we have this interesting avoidance of death, and it's like baked very deeply into our culture. And I wonder why. I wonder what kind of hurdles you guys, or Molly specifically, you've observed that make it harder to talk about death and dying, especially like in a culture that's a little bit more resistive to it as opposed to others. Oh, and Molly, I think you're getting a question. Oh yeah, Anna's requesting your link to your book. And now that I noticed the chat, I was going to mention James over here posted a short film about his experience with his mother and dementia. So that's actually really cool. So I want to shout that out because I know for sure I'm going to bookmark that and watch that later. So yeah, like hurdles to chatting about death conversations. Anyone? What have we observed? I have a whole litany of them, so I'll shut up about this. I could rant about this all day. So
I think we should start talking about death at the level of a child when children are young, at their level. Don't scare them, but at least talk to them about it. Don't shield them from it. I think most parents, they don't want to scare the kids, so they shield them and they make up words to say, oh, grandma, well, she just went to heaven, and don't really explain to the child that the child's not going to see that grandparent again. It's just they're someplace else. And I don't think we should be shielding children from that. We should be telling them the truth. And then, if you're constantly shielding them as children, then as they become teenagers and adults, I think they start feeling like there's something dirty about death. There's something that you really can't talk about. It's a secretive thing. It's something to be afraid of. And it's not something to be afraid of. It's something we're all going to experience. And, if we don't have information and knowledge about what we're going to experience, we're going to have a lot of fear. So for me, for years, I was afraid to die because I didn't know what was going to happen after I died. Well, now I have that under control. And as I spoke to Niki about it recently, my only fear now is what's the process of dying? How is it going to feel? Is it going to be painful? What should I expect? So we need to talk about those things. And that should be just like you're talking about the pain in your elbow. You ought to be able to talk about your death, and everybody's death. Those are just my views.
No, I 100% agree. I know some people like to say words are words, language is just language, but no, language is not just language, especially when it comes to children. I see a lot of problems resulting when they say to kids, oh, like grandma went away, your mom went away. So what are you going to do? Instill an abandonment complex in the kid? Because sometimes they're like, well, why did grandma go away? Is grandma coming back? It's like, no, they died. The end. Like otherwise there's just room for wishy-washiness. Like you said, it can instill a feeling of like, oh, well, death is this, once they grow old enough to realize what it is. Death is this like secret, and they had to shield me from it when I was little because there must be something inherently wrong with it. I was encountering a social media post the other day by like a very, very religious young lady. And I was very annoyed by what I read because she was saying, oh, we shouldn't be normalizing death, and death is bad, and death is the enemy. And I'm like, whoa there. Like, no, you're really contributing to problematic views on death and dying. And I don't think that's what you're trying to do, but you are, because you're taking certain things way too literally. But I digress because I could rant about that for a long time. But so I'll throw that out there. There's like religious hurdles to talking about death and dying, which have been instilled and baked into religion because, that's kind of the point of it. Jesus overcame death, therefore death is something bad to be overcome. And then we have the whole mindset of, which is really used in the West, the whole battle mindset. Like, he lost his fight with cancer. He fought bravely against this illness. He's such a fighter. He never gave up. I'm like, why is it some weird militaristic language you're using? It just kind of makes an us versus them. And I'm not saying that death is something like, I'm not trying to normalize the pain of it or the loss of it or the gravity or impact of it. But I feel like certain things have contributed to making it sound very, very bad and over there and far away and not touchable. That's definitely an issue. Sophie here posted Duck, Death, and the Tour. That's cool.
It's fantastic resource.
Oh, that's cool. Is it a book? I never actually came across that. Cool. Thank you very much, Sophie, for posting that.
Can I just respond to Kim? Because that thing about the hurdles that you were asking, because you made the point about suffering, Kim, and I think B.J. Miller, who's a great hero of mine on death and dying, said something around the fear isn't about death itself. When you really drill down and ask people, it's about suffering whilst dying. And I think that's a quite helpful distinction for us to make, that actually, if we could understand and we could get on top of what it is we need or we want to alleviate our suffering whilst dying, then it might separate this fear of death and maybe connect death more to living well until the end of our lives.
Right. Yeah, I always thought that my fear was what was going to happen after I died. And as I started thinking about it more in depth, it's not that, it was the process of dying.
Yeah.
That was my fear.
Yeah.
You know, so, that's where the dualists come in, and that's where hospice comes in. But you have to be willing to talk about it, and you have to give them the, I guess, the permission to talk to you about it openly and honestly.
Yeah.
And I do know that there are some family members that'll just shut it right down, even though you want to talk about it, and they need to be overridden. That's where the dealers and the hospice have to come in and say, no, it's the patient that's more important at this point. You come afterwards because you're going to be dealing with it afterwards, and we can help you. But, there's a finite amount of time that this dying person has that we can make life a little easier for them, and death a little easier for them.
Anna, from one end of life dual to another, I actually want to pose a question specifically to you. Actually, Hamala, you too, I forgot you're a doula. Something in our training, I think it's one of our core tenets that says, it basically says the patient kind of knows best, and we're supposed to dispense information to them in as much or as little doses as they want. So let's say we have a patient who's in like abject denial and they don't want to know, kind of like what my mother was just saying. Is it ethical and preferred at that point to say, hey, here's where it is. This is straight. This is not working out. It's not gonna end well. Kind of like what Tracy was saying, like, hey, Dad, like, it's not happening. She's going down. Is it preferable to do that, or is it more preferable and ethical to say things like, to kind of just adapt to their level of comfort? Because that's kind of what we're there for, right? We're there to serve and to help, and not like impose our own. I know I'm really a big fan of Stephen Jenkinson, and I'm sure anyone in this space has kind of heard of him. He's a hell of a pot stirrer, and as we know, because he's a very provocative man. And I know he very strongly would say things like, absolutely not. You need to objectively tell them, like, here's how it is, and to hell with all of these stupid dual attendants, like, just deal with it. And I'm curious where both of you would fall on that spectrum of kind of tied back into what my mother was saying, like, should you override? Should you dispense wisdom and knowledge when it's not wanted, or how do we kind of fall into that? What are your philosophies on that?
Do you want me to go? Or Hamali, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think there are different kinds of doula. And I think that what we have to remember is every person is an individual with a family, and every death is different. So, and I think that my interpretation of that, and I think one of the things that we encourage in our doula training is that we are very much ourselves in this, and we are ourselves in response to a relationship with a family. And whilst I think you would be led by that person, but I would not be for not being clear. I would not be for, there are ways of saying things. And I think that starting the conversation and how to have the difficult conversation is a very important part of what our training is about. But I think it is important to have the difficult conversation. For me, it's about the way the conversation is begun, is then held, and ensuring that around that person and that family is what is needed to hold what are the outcomes possibly of that honest conversation. So it's not a straightforward answer, because a death happens very much within, well, sometimes not, but within a community of sorts, or within at least other people. And so they're very important in that. But so I think, yeah, I mean, I could spend a lot of time talking about it, but I think I would not be obfuscating about it. I would think it's important that people know, but it's how the conversation is happening is the most important thing for me. And if there is a situation where it felt that it was absolutely not safe, or someone wasn't going to be well supported in hearing what might be said, then I would look at that very carefully in terms of how the conversation took place. That's a start, Himali.
I would agree with Anna, and it's like she said, that every death looks different, and every situation is different in how you handle it. Some conversation has to be handled very carefully with the family and with the person that is dying. And from my understanding of your question is, if sometimes families don't want to tell the loved one, their mother or father, that they're dying or they're in the process, then how do you handle it? Whether do you tell them or not? It is, I feel, not my place, but I am someone that would like to be more open and talk more openly about it. And so I would definitely talk to the family in terms of maybe why, figuring out what is the root cause, why don't they want them to know. And the thing is that the person that is dying, they already know. Mm-hmm. They have a feeling.
Yeah.
They already know, probably. They sometimes know what time, when they're going to pass away or transition. So I feel, and they probably are hiding from their family because they don't want to hurt them. So it's that hidden thing, both of them are trying to protect each other from that hurt, from that grief, from that suffering, or that emotion that they don't want to share with each other. But how beautiful it is to share emotion with each other, knowing for the loved one that is passing that I'm going to be missed, I'm going to be remembered, I'm going to be honored. And for the family member that the person that is transitioning, that yes, no matter what, I'm going to watch over you. That conversation can go so much deeper and can be so beautiful and so, I don't know, sacred is the word that comes if you, really let it happen. Mm-hmm. And so I do feel passionate that, it should be talked openly, and it should be, I be tiptoed around,
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. My dad would not, anytime the death came up, he made me leave the room, or, if I was talking to the hospice nurses and whatever, we were not allowed to talk any death or negativity or anything in front of my mama. that bothered me because I'm like, we need to know. But early on in my mom's Alzheimer's, she knew, like you said, she knew something was wrong with her. And she would go, what's wrong with me? What's going to happen with me? And all of those questions were just swept under the rug, because my dad didn't want to talk about it. I'm more like you. If I would have, listening to this conversation now, I would do things a little differently. I would probably wait till he went outside and I would sit there with my mom and maybe she and I would have the discussion. But with Dad, he just didn't allow us to do that. But she knew something was wrong. And I would have loved to have had a candid discussion with her. He said about the impending death. And like you said, Mom, I would love for her to know that I go to the graveside as often as I can and give her flowers and talk to her and all that and let her know that she would not be forgotten. But anyway.
No, it's beautiful, Tracy, though. What you're sharing is beautiful. And what I think you, or maybe it was Kim said before, is if we could only know when someone is going to die, and that's what we can't know. But Tracy, I think what doulas are trying to do is if somebody asks that question, and I've been asked it very many times, what is it going to look like? What's it going to be like? There are ways in which we can help prepare people simply because we've been there before, to know what might happen, what to look for in signs in the body, for example, that happen, the kinds of ways that things will slow down. So those are the things that then can perhaps help. So, but nobody can ever say when it's going to happen. So that issue of where we all will feel unprepared, I think it's really hard not to, but we can do the best that we can to ready ourselves for that moment. But thank you, Tracy, for sharing. It's really, these are very deep experiences for us all. And it's really good to share them so openly in a space like this. Thank you.
It is. Thank you.
I have a question. How can we, at least in the States, I don't know about in Europe or in any other countries, but in the States, we all know about hospice. And hospice is a wonderful organization, and they helped me and Tracy a lot. How do we get the information out that there are doulas and what y'all do? I didn't know anything about a death doula until Niki. I had no clue. How do y'all get that out there so that rolls off of everybody's tongue like hospice rolls off of everybody's tongue? What do we do?
Good question.
Good question. Niki.
Actually, what I'm still stuck on is the whole hospice rolling off everybody's tongue. Like, yes, it does, but people are also scared of hospice. Yeah. So that's like a whole.
They are afraid of hospice.
Two issues we're trying to solve here. So you're posing that question to me.
Well, I mean, I can answer. In the UK, I think there's been an exponential, but it's still small, exponential rise in the talking about doulas. And that's been down to various high-profile palliative care people like Catherine Mannix, Rachel Clark, writing books which have become bestsellers. What that has done, however, though, is given an exponential demand to a training organisation like ours, which can only train in small groups. We are online, so there is a limit to how, and the training, our training for doulas, I don't know how long yours took, Niki, but there's a foundation which is 5 days, but the full diploma, which is a very, a certificated course, is 21 days of training over at least a year. So there is a growing understanding, I think, but I think it's going. The doula movement is finding itself under huge pressure to then meet the demand, even though people still we're tiny. So I don't know. I haven't got a good answer to that. All I can say is that I think it's growing here, and INELDA in the States, isn't INELDA the organisation in the States?
Yes.
That's the national organisation. In England, it's called End of Life Doula UK. There are associations now which very powerfully provide support for working doulas, but also spread the word.
Yeah, I know here in the States and here, the way that I get a lot of exposure to it is browsing about it online. I follow a bunch of high-profile death doulas and caretakers and things like that. So they have a very large online presence. As far as in real life, I know Sophie actually just dropped in the chat. She was mentioning visibility suits seem key, which would include seeing the role in pop culture and its presence in things like death cafes. Do you guys have death cafes in the UK? I think you guys do.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So it's not just a
That's where it started, UK, and then so I host online death cafes with another end of life doula, and you know, everybody's invited. We host it every other week in the evenings, and so I think it's growing. The more and more, like now, I'm seeing more and more people enrolling in end of life doula. There's a wait period. I did my certification from University of Vermont, and there's a waiting list now for people to get into the programs, and so it's growing. People are hearing about it more and more. So the only way is just talking about it, writing about it, blogging and social media, to see that there are people out there that can help, support, and care during those needs for caregivers and the loved ones transitioning.
Yeah. Like with all things, I think just talking about it, same with normalizing death and bringing that conversation more into focus. Same thing goes with doulas. We just got to chat about it, make aware of it. I mean, I'm pretty open about the fact that I'm a death doula. People don't really get that. They're like, oh, your weird death stuff, right? I'm like, yeah, my weird death stuff. Let's just leave it at that, I guess. Anna, I think James was asking if you could put the links for the your organization for doula training.
Yeah.
Yes, James, do it. It's a wonderful program. I mean, just going through it is just fantastic. But I digress.
I think I have.
Yes. All right, cool.
I haven't got quite the full. Yeah, he'll find it.
All right. That's kind of the questions I wanted to ask you guys. I think we've had a really illuminating chat about it. This is a great time, I guess, to invite questions or comments from the audience. I think we have a couple people still working, not too many. But otherwise, if there's anything else you guys want to add on or say.
I wonder whether James... Oh, sorry, James has been muted there, but I know you're contributing to the chat. Whether you want to join us, James.
Sorry about that. I was trying to have the moderator's head on as well, and then I realised this has been very close to my heart and my life experience as well. So, thank you all for a beautiful, rich conversation. That's in many ways it's brought a lot of stuff back to me, because it's just in brief, I felt that when Mum's died, I was expecting all kind of bells and whistles to go off, because she was loved in the area and was very involved in stuff, right until 6 months that she passed. And there was a very strong dementia support group, and she was a potter all her life, and there was an art group here in Cambridge that kind of helped with our activities. Sadly, it got cut due to funding issues. But I expected kind of all bells and whistles to go off, and was kind of surprised that it didn't, and then kind of knew that I was stepping into that role with her, and we'd been on that journey, etc., because I'd come back to help look after her in the final year or two, and support the death of her dear partner John. But there's a lot of creativity as well, a lot of beautiful creativity. I think in one other session, arts and dementia and death, moving towards death. Anyway, I've got a lot of thoughts, but thank you for all the work you do and all the kind of input and all. It's important to keep having questions, isn't it? Questions and throw our voices and our experiences into this world, because we are going to experience it all.
Yeah, we sure are.
And Anna, I think we've met before somewhere, but I am certainly going to look into the training now. So thanks for that.
Yeah, there is a bit of a wait, I'm afraid, for us as well. I mean, this is only good news in a way. Well, it is, but it would be great to see you there, James. Yeah.
All right, guys. It seems like a pretty good place to wrap up.
Well, thank you, Niki.
Thank you, Niki.
Thank you.
Thank
On
you guys
behalf
very
of
much.
the
Thank you to all of you.
Yeah, thanks to all of you is right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It was lovely hearing from you and sharing and all of your input. We had some professionals in the room as well who are actually.
Hi, Eddie.
Well, I guess he decided to be good.
That's Uncle Eddie saying hello to you guys.
All my family too.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Right. Thanks a lot. So,
Thank you.
quick
Thanks,
housekeeping note: when you hit the leave button, close your actual browser, because otherwise it's going to keep you in the room and you'll just be like sitting here by yourself. So it doesn't like the weirdest platform ever. So.
Can someone save the chat? Actually, sorry, I don't know how to do that. James, do you?
James.
Or does Tracy Stewart?
James,
does anybody know how to save the chat?
I'm not sure how to do that.
Okay.
I'm not either.
I'm just going to copy it. No, I'm not.
You copy the whole
Okay,
thing.
don't worry. I'll stay here and copy the links and then work out with Kat how to do it. Because there's some very useful links for everybody in there. Thanks, James and others, for putting them up. So it would be a shame to lose those.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I'll hang with you just in case you need some help.
Yeah, okay. We'll work out how to.
I'm afraid if I leave, it might kick the whole set. Oh, Darren.
Yeah, no, we mustn't leave the session because it will destroy the chat. Or one of us mustn't. That's right.
All right, yeah, absolutely. But everybody else, thank you so much.
Everybody else.
Darren back in just so we can tell them that we're leaving.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much. Bye.
Niki, will you send me some info on? I would love to connect with Tracy and Kim and Anna.
Yeah, absolutely. I shall. I will make it into that. Darren, everybody is just now signing off, but I figured I'd let you in to let you know that we're signing off.
Okay, I'm really sorry I had to leave earlier.
For a noble cause.
I did a quick dash around. We deliver meals for the. It's a voluntary organisation in my local community, and today and Friday are my days. So, but anyway, it's done now.
Oh well, thank you so much even more for being here during your fitting us into your volunteer shift. So that's
it's an absolute pleasure. It was great to hear everyone as well, and I'd be really interested in sort of reaching out and touching base with everybody, Niki.
Yeah.
Himali, I know, and she very gracefully submitted an article for our guest blog last month.
Wait, whoa! We could do that, Darren. I want to write for you.
Yeah, please. We'd love to. Yeah, absolutely, Niki.
I didn't know that. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely, not a problem at all. We'll be happy to publish it. Thank you, Himali. Sorry, we didn't get a chance to speak. And Anna, I would love to touch base with you as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to cut and paste the chat so we don't lose it. But no, me too, Darren. Well, I'm living well, dying well training, so we can be in touch.
Perfect. Smashing. Have a wonderful day, everybody. I'm sorry.
Thank you. You too.
Anyway.
Thanks, Darren.
Great to see you, Darren. Bye.
Take care. Bye.